Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on student basic needs support. My name is Melanie Harris. I'm the Director of Network Operations and Design at Complete College America. We are honored to be partnering with the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative for this workshop series. I'd like to turn it over to Lily, but first I forgot the Zoom logistics. So this is a meeting, so you do have the ability to unmute. However, we ask that you please remain muted for the duration of today's webinar. We do engage with the chat heavily, so if you have questions for our panelists today, want to share your own resources or references, please feel free to drop that in the chat. We'll pull everything that's been shared there and share it back with you after today's session. We are recording today, so you'll also get a link to that recording once we wrap. And closed captioning is available and can be turned on at the bottom of your screen. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Lily. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Lily Mass-McKinley. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative. I'm joined by my colleagues, Beth Pennington and Phyllis Clark, and we're very excited to have you with us today. I'm so excited for this panel of rock stars and just to talk more about student basic needs support for our students here in Kentucky. I did want to just tell you a little bit about the collaborative as we get started, although I'm sure many of you have heard this little pitch if you've been tuning into any of the other webinars, but here it goes. It's very short. Let's see. So the collaborative started last October, and we're relatively new to our work here in Kentucky, but we have certainly taken off at a lightning pace. Our mission is to help build the capacity of our campus partners and to really help reinforce you all in the work that you're already doing, the priorities that you have, and to help us accelerate that progress. We are truly built on the kind of foundation that we believe we can do more together than any of us can do individually. And by coming together in spaces like this to listen to panelists, to share with one another our common challenges or the different initiatives that we're trying out, we'll all be better off for it. And the collaborative, really serves as a convener in this role, in this space. And we also want to be that backbone support to help us as we identify themes that we might want to move forward. The collaborative can help move things down the road. We have 5 kind of core areas of our work. The first one is communities of practice, and student basic needs was really the voice of our campus partners early on in many of our campus visits. This was a top priority at our campuses in figuring out how we can support our students in a really holistic way. There are going to be other communities of practice that will emerge as we continue listening to our partners and the needs and the common priorities that you all share. We do have an online platform called the Impact Exchange, which allows us to continue this conversation, to share questions with one another, to provide resources and support. And that's not just the collaborative sharing information with our campus partners, it's campus partner to campus partner. And so, after every single one of our webinars, we post the meeting recording, we post all the materials shared, we post notes and high takeaways onto the Impact Exchange. We'll send that link out to you to access, but we really do hope that you consider it a platform to engage with your colleagues beyond just the webinar series itself. We're also looking for opportunities to provide professional development. This is certainly an example of professional development, but that could be any number of topics. We have a change leadership initiative that we are working on with our campuses that are engaged in change work. And so we're really excited to be able to kind of integrate that into the different initiatives. Technical assistance is another opportunity that the collaborative is currently working with national partners, Complete College America on the Purpose First initiative, as well as Jobs for the Future on the Network Demonstration Project. And we're looking for other opportunities as well to bring technical assistance support to our campuses on specific initiatives. I know that we're going to wrap up here at the end and I'll come back, but just to plant these seeds, the Student Success Summit is coming up April 11th and 12th. We've just extended registration in case there's a few folks that haven't had a chance yet, and that will go until this Thursday. And then we're also hosting, in addition to our community of practice on student basic needs, kind of a deeper dive on mental health, which is a component of this bigger picture. But certainly our mental health practitioners have a lot of specific areas that they'd like to chat and focus on. So that is all that I have for the collaborative. I'm going to turn it back to you, Melanie.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I would like to turn it over to our panel for today. Dr. Felipe Henao is the Dean of Students for New York Institute of Technology and will be leading our phenomenal panel of presidents. Again, I encourage you to drop your questions in the chat for the panelists today, and we'll get those into the conversation. So over to you, Felipe.
Thank you, Melanie. And thank you, Lily. Good afternoon. And again, thank you for joining us for this timely conversation around the impact and return on investment of students' basic needs support. I'm Dr. Felipe Henao, and I have the absolute honor of moderating a conversation with 3 leaders in higher education who are committed and dedicated to addressing students' basic needs as a student success barrier to college completion. Before I introduce our distinguished panelists, please allow me to provide some context for today's conversation. Food insecurity and student basic needs among college students has always existed. However, this issue has received national attention in recent years, particularly during COVID. As we know, college students experiencing food insecurity often also experience cost of living challenges, such as difficulty paying rent, mortgage, or utility bills. As tuition and housing costs increase, more students are finding themselves in the untenable position of being forced to choose whether to spend their limited financial resources on food, housing, or completing their post-secondary education. Food insecurity, coupled with the lack of access to other social services, including transportation, health insurance, childcare, and food stamps, is a growing barrier to student success. The United States Government Accountability Office reported low income as a common factor. Often, this affects first-generation and single parents disproportionately, as well as Black and Brown students and LGBTQ. In a poll conducted in April 2019 of 192 college presidents, roughly 14% mentioned housing and food insecurity as a top 5 concern. So if you do the math, it's not that many out of our college presidents. Now, the time you all have been waiting for, so let's meet our panelists. Today, we're joined by Kimberly Hollingsworth, who has served over 3 years as president of Olive Harvey College, which is one of 7 schools in the City College of Chicago. We are also joined by Dr. Michael Bastin, president of Rockland Community College, which is part of the State University of New York system. President Bastin has invested over 20 years of his career to this work. And finally, Dr. Chuck Lloyd, who has served over 5 years as president of White Mountains Community College in New Hampshire, which includes 3 campus locations. Let me tell you, I had the opportunity to spend one-on-one time with them, and I'm so excited to you all to learn from them as much as I did. But before diving into our conversation, I want to provide a definition for what we're using as basic needs. The minimal elements that humans need, such as food, clothing, and shelter, as well as the essential services such as access to drinking water, to sanitation, education, healthcare facilities, and to public transportation. And you wouldn't think that administrators or colleges are thinking about these issues, but we really are. So colleges across the country and their student affairs and support service offices must be prepared to aid in meeting today's students' basic physiological and safety needs in order for them to learn and persist. So I'm gonna turn it over to our panelists, and I'm gonna invite you to add anything else that you'd like to add as your role as a president. But the first question that I like to start out with is, how much of addressing students' basic needs is influenced by your position of power versus moral obligation or personal values? And I'll welcome Kimberly to kick us off, please.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the illustrious introduction. I have served for the last 3 years at Olive Harvey College, but prior to that, I was the vice president of academic and student affairs at Malcolm X College. We are a system of 7 independently accredited institutions here in Chicago. I've spent 23 years of my life in community college education. So I see serving students as not just a moral obligation, but also I really value it personally. But I really honestly think that you can strike the right balance, because ensuring that the students' basic needs are met is really core to the multiple missions of the community college. We don't serve one type of student, and our students come to us for very different reasons. It's a moral obligation because we should be doing this work. It's just absolutely the right thing to do. And I fundamentally and philosophically believe that. It's also closely associated to my personal values because the principles and standards upon which I lead my life is influenced by my beliefs, by my background, my education, my positionality, and of course, my wider social network. But we also know that some of the personal ideas that can originate from prejudice, myths, assumptions, and implicit bias. So we really need to be aware of how our values influence what we do. And so I'm constantly looking for that checks and balances. So prioritizing student basic needs is really paramount to the success of our students.
Thank you. Chuck?
I have to follow that up. My good, well said. I guess I would just take a half a step back. And first of all, I was a community college student prior to transferring on. And, I've lived this to some degree. I've got about 20 years of community college experience working, first of all, on the front lines with student engagement, student life, admissions, coaching, which I will put in a whole other bucket, coaching, spending time with students all day, every day, overnight. You learn a lot about them, more than you want to know. But I love the question. And I think if you can just say yes to the question, right? The question about, moral or the position of power. The important thing I've always said, as I've worked my way up, into administration, vice president, now president for the last 5 years, is our morals don't change, our obligations don't change, our voice gets louder. And as you work your way, up into administration and you have more of an audience and you can have more impact and influence, it now becomes more of an obligation to continue to use that voice to meet the needs of students. And I would just say it underlies the holistic approach to student success in general that we always preach at White Mountains Community College.
Thank you. Michael?
When you are raised in a community and a working class family where you are sort of taught to have a love of family, love of community, and to really support the development and growth of people, when that's a part of your early raising, it grows up with you. And so I come from that working class family in South Jamaica, Queens, in New York. Not all the not just great rappers come from New York, college presidents come from there as well. But I can tell you that my commitment is built on a career that says people should live the lives they deserve. I was an attorney before I came into the educational experience in this way. And I represented educational corporations, religious institutions, nonprofit organizations. I represented tenant associations and really getting people in position to fight for their right to be. Mm-hmm. And so as a president, all of that sort of formative work with my parents and with my community, all of that work as a public interest lawyer, all of that work as an educator, teaching in paralegal studies and legal studies programs, all of that sort of helped to form and shape the way I ask questions, the way I interrogate systems, the way I think about ensuring that your zip code of birth is not what limits you from opportunities in this country and in this world. So from my point of view, every decision that I make as a president is made with that deep, abiding sense of investment that my parents and my community placed in me to make sure that others are better than they were before you met them.
Thank you so much for all of you being so candid and vulnerable to share your personal experiences. And a couple of things that I heard you theme is obviously love for community and serving your community. This is the core value of community colleges and private institutions, hopefully as well. And Chuck, I really love that you said that your values do not change. They just strengthen and grow your voice. Michael, I was reminded by a student who said that food insecurity and lack of access to student basic needs is a form of segregation, and that it's disgusting that government and communities use this to keep folks down. And our students are coming from very various communities background, and they're coming to college for that social mobility. And so obviously there is a moral obligation to be able to serve. And today more than ever, post-pandemic, maybe two of you can comment on how that need to serve students' basic needs has changed or shifted from post-COVID to endemic, I would use. Whoever would like to answer.
One of the things that happened to our faculty and staff is they were shook by the realities of the pandemic. And so I think they become much more acutely aware of some of the challenges that our students face. You know, it's easy to sort of, where you sit is where you stand. Mm-hmm. And so if you are not from a challenged background, if you don't have economic fragility, if everything is kind of nice, neat, and works for you, you're not always as empathetic to those who go through the common daily struggles. This pandemic had a way of humanizing for all that there's no one that can evade the challenge of loneliness, the challenge of sort of fragility, and sort of allowed a lot of people to dial in and say, you know, I have to have much more of a greater stake in the common purpose of my students and my community. So I think this pandemic, for those who felt that they could be a little bit further removed from the real issues of real people, when it hit home in their lives, it now makes everyone a little bit more sensitive to the plight and struggle of the other, including our students in the classroom.
I would echo all of that and just add, you know, I feel like it really has, the pandemic has normalized these needs where, you know, I would argue food pantries or, you know, clothing shelters, all of these pieces used to be sort of this little tucked away hallway in some of our colleges, or that's a nice thing that a volunteer group is doing instead of putting it front and center and saying, no, this is the essential work we need to do for our students to be successful. And I think we've gotten a lot of buy-in. Later we'll talk about our meals program, but some of this would not have happened until it was highlighted. And I would even argue, I'm not a big, you know, media guy, but the media has done a couple of things and shine a light on some of this, you know, from all populations. You know, Michael is exactly right. Nobody can hide, but I think it's really been normalized to understand that everyone has these needs and really put it front and center for us.
Yeah, I would just have to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I think what's even more apparent is the need for institutions to be more equity minded. The pandemic has taught us, you know, that the digital divide is real, that access, you know, that has been denied to marginalized populations, you know, was even greater. And so we took a much closer look at our equity efforts as a result of the pandemic. It really forced us to ensure that our policies and practices were really supporting the populations of students that needed to be supported. And so, yeah, I think the pandemic, you know, was a wake-up call to the entire country, to the world, about how we can better support marginalized populations and students overall.
Thank you, all of you. You know, I was brought back to when we're sitting in front of the television. Unlike you, Chuck, I watched way too much news during the first year of the pandemic. And, you know, we're looking at the long lines in Texas and New York and California, different places. And you looked outside and you were like, I could be sitting next to somebody that is in need. And so that, like Chuck, like you've referenced, normalizing it. However, even with so much national attention, and obviously today's conversation focuses on today's college student, we have adjunct faculty who also experience lack of access to basic needs. Mm-hmm. And there's still continues to remain stigma about talking about mental health, about needing access to students' basic needs. So how have each of you addressed the stigma around food insecurity and basic needs? I know, Chuck, you mentioned briefly the placement. How much of that was shifted either before the pandemic, during the pandemic, or how long have you all been addressing the stigma which continues to permeate in our society?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the students are very helpful in this area. You know, I think some of this is terminology where I mentioned the term food pantry intentional, where that has a stigma attached to it, just that term. Our students wanted to rename ours. They call it the cabinet or cabbie. You know, they stroll through and grab some food. And yeah, it used to be a small closet literally down a hallway. That's why I used that reference. Now it is out in our student center. It's generally like, you know, we put it out where we do events, swoop through, grab some food. The other thing is we've taken a blanket approach for some of this. So we've created what's called Meals Included, which is all of our students get free breakfast and lunch, no matter your income level, no matter, you know, how many courses you're taking. If you're 100% online, they still come in, and students are coming through our bistro. We've worked with philanthropists and grants and some of our own operating funds everyone gets a meal. So it's normalized. I'm going to go back to that term of people stroll through, they get free meals. They get to do the grab and go through the cabbie on the way out so they can prepare meals over the weekend. And it's front and center, but it's understood. And it's a social norm now to stroll in and get these meals and flash your ID card and scan through, and that's what you do. It's free. So we try to just remove that one barrier, and I can't wait to tackle some others. But I have this visual of a food pantry, and you walk in and you go in, and everyone sees you coming and going. Oh, that's the student that needs help. No, we're all here. We all need help. We're all on the same page. So really, again, normalize it.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. We created a Panther Pantry. Our mascot is a panther. And we didn't want this to have a stigma associated with it. So similar to Chuck, we put our pantry front and center. So immediately when you walk in, just past the welcome desk is the food pantry. And it is not unusual to have lines out the door. And our student government was really instrumental in, getting the word out about the benefit of an on-site food pantry. So much so, this spring, we will be moving to a community garden. So, teaching people how to grow their own food. Yes, it's amazing to have this wonderful resource, but with respect to sustainability and ensuring that people can cultivate their own food, we will be starting a community garden with our students and with our community, where we will grow herbs and the like for even more fresh vegetables and opportunities for our community at large.
I was very, very proud of my folks that did the curbside pantry. Yeah. So that ultimately during the pandemic, folks didn't even have to come into, the campus. They could just drive up curbside, pick up, all staffed by volunteers, student volunteers, staff volunteers during the challenging time. A lot of the funds were provided by philanthropy, our alumni association, our faculty unions, and others during the difficult time. So, very, very proud of the fact that, we did not let a sort of a health emergency and crisis keep us from supporting our students, keep us from supporting our community in meaningful and important ways. And in speaking with the normalization process, one of the nice things that I'm very proud of my faculty, it's on the syllabus. If you need help, this is where you go. Yeah. These are the hours. These are people so it's embedded in everyone's syllabus. So like the faculty are leaning in and saying, listen, we want to make sure that everybody knows how to get access to the services. It's not just, when I was at LaGuardia, one of the things we did was, as part of financial aid, we did benefit screening for public benefits, because we wanted it to just be another avenue of financial support for students to be able to pay for their education and have all of those wraparounds. So it is important for us to find meaningful ways to embed these opportunities, which reduces the stigma and allows folks to get the access to what they need so that they can persist and ultimately graduate.
Thank you all. Yeah, and I'll just add that in my previous institution, we had 3 food pantries, and something that I always talk about is, and what I heard you all say, is access. So the placement of the pantry, obviously not having it in this dark, dingy room. We usually had a DJ, we had a poster board. I mean, it was an event that you did not want to miss. And people would come and say, what's going on? And we often captured folks to register that wouldn't have known about it or accessed it. And I always tell, I think somebody, I don't remember exactly who, but enculturating it into your everyday language, right? Our support services are tutoring, academic advising, accessibility, counseling, and our pantry, our market, our whatever we call ours, the Grizzly Cupboard. But I'm glad that Martha actually posted a question that was going to be my next lead in, which is, how do we pay for these outreach? These programs often sound great, and we think about, well, my resources are limited, my operational budget does not support this. So how have you used your roles or your teams to build these partnerships and fund some of these initiatives?
Yeah, so I would just have to say that partnership really matters. We had the distinct pleasure of partnering with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. So the only thing that we had to do at our institution was identify some space. And so they're here every week delivering fresh produce. We've also really taken a very intentional approach to sourcing for additional grant opportunities. Over the last 4 years, we brought in about $17 million of additional funding to support the needs of our students. So again, partnerships with industry has been really critical. We're actually looking to pilot open educational resources. We have a philanthropic donor because what we realized, and talking to our students and surveying our students, nearly 30% of our students don't even purchase a textbook. Less than 30% of our students purchase a textbook. And how are you expected to be able to persist and complete without a textbook? And we tell these stories to our partners in industry, they're equally as concerned because we're educating the future workforce. And so I would absolutely say, constantly being out in the community, having a pulse on the concerns and the issue within your organization, and being able to tell that story to your industry partners really goes a long way. We've had so many donations over the last couple of years in light of the pandemic that it has proven to be very beneficial for our students.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Partnerships is number one, but also that is our role, right? I'm looking at the questions, how do we pay for these outreach? I always lead with, how can we afford not to? Mm-hmm. And if we are not doing this, we are missing out on students, college access, students coming at all. I also say keeping students. So, in a perfect world, this service, in part of all of our wraparound support services, is the way we get students in, we keep them, and we help them complete along the way. That being said, I understand, there is a very practical matter of the dollars and cents. This is our first time running, first of all, the meals program. We estimated a $4 breakfast, a $7 lunch, $11 per student per day, times 5 days, times 1,000 students. So we did the math, and around $130,000 or $140,000 is our estimate. So we shopped that. Any president or VP or anyone that's out in the community is going to say, we go out and we shop programs. I walk into a charitable foundation, I need $25,000. Here's what you're going to get for it. We talk to our partners who, again, you hear that term, who's hiring your students? Mm-hmm. Who are the ones hiring your students? So Milton Caterpillar from our diesel program, Lincoln Electric from our welding, et cetera. So there are partnerships there. And that's really helped pay for our program, but they also want to see the numbers. We do surveys following it. We just got it. And Felipe, I just sent you a copy of the results. If you want to distribute those after, fine. But we've got students saying there's an opportunity cost. They're no longer driving through Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, so they're getting to school earlier on time. They're not spending $9. So there's an instant ROI that our students are seeing. So there's a persistent number as well. The last thing I will say from partnership is, our CABI, the cabinet, we have local banks and people have volunteer days. Granite United Way does a volunteer day of service, and people are doing literally drives to help stock our cabinet. So they'll come in, and Walmart has been a great partner. It's managed by an AmeriCorps Vista. Folks are familiar with the Vista program. We have a Vista volunteer that manages the program. So the overhead for us is rather low. Happy to get into any more detail, but I could talk forever. I'll leave it alone for a moment.
And I would just add one other thing. I absolutely applaud my colleagues and the things that they're doing. We're doing very similar things. But let me just say this, as a president and as a college, you have the opportunity to make strategic investments. And the fact is, if retention is not a strategic investment, it's always going to be a challenge when you have enrollments that are declining because population growth in the country is waning for high school population. Mm-hmm. So you have to make a decision. What are the ways that you can engage in low cost, effective ways to retain students? Mm-hmm. Well, investing in the wraparound supports that ultimately enable a student to complete and to continue so that they can actually move forward in their lives is a worthwhile investment. And so we engage our foundation boards and those members to participate in helping us to fund some of these programs, growing together where we're working with families, children and their parents going to school and others. These kinds of investments actually improve the college's bottom line because the retention dollars that you get far outweigh any investment that you make relative to sort of supporting wraparound services for students. That those retention points actually translate into dollars. Because as we bleed out students because life happens to them, you still have to pay all the stuff you got to pay for your college. Mm-hmm. So, making the case that retention matters, and not only for the completion, but also for the financial stability of the college, says that's why you make this kind of investment to get this kind of return, which ultimately improves our community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. A couple of observations is I love that you are all talking from an asset mindset instead of a deficient negative. You're not embarrassed to tell your partners or the corporations about the kinds of students that we're serving today and how they will help contribute to the workforce. It's truly a partnership. And something else that it's getting exciting, and we'll talk about data in a little bit. But what are some other things that you have worked to remove barriers for students at your current institutions?
And so I'll just add a little context. I didn't really describe my student population. We are, a community college located on the southeast side of Chicago. It's considered a predominantly Black institution federally. We have about a 70% Black population, 24% Hispanic, and about 5% other. Over 80% of our population is Pell eligible, with about 93% placing at the remedial level in math and English. So needless to say, our students come with very insurmountable barriers to success. And the average age of our student population, we don't have a traditional age student population. The average age is 26. Our college had the good fortune of joining the Illinois Equity and Attainment Consortium, and we developed an equity plan. I spoke a little bit about this and spoken at other webinars about it, but it really has guided us towards becoming a more equity-centered institution. And those who are familiar with Georgia State University's mantra, we kind of adopted it in our equity plan and our strategic plan, and that's being a student-ready institution versus assuming that our students are college ready. And so in addition to creating the food pantry and adopting an open educational resource platform, we've also been looking at a series of our financial reports. And what we realize is that the typical financial barrier for persistence for our students is roughly around $500. And so instead of, waiting for students to come to us and say, hey, I need this extra $500 to pay off a debt or to, persist to the next semester, we automatically apply the $500. We also learned that a major impediment to students securing scholarships. Now with our HERF money and all of the, philanthropic donations, we have so much scholarship money, but our students were not accessing the scholarship money. So when we looked at the metrics and identified where students stopped in the application process, it was at the letter of recommendation phase. And so what did we stop doing? We stopped requiring a letter of recommendation, not because we don't think a letter of recommendation is important, but oftentimes, particularly students of color, lack agency and the self-efficacy to self-advocate, and maybe don't even have the confidence to build a network where they feel comfortable, reaching out to an instructor or to, a pastor or the like. And so we stopped requiring a letter of recommendation, and our scholarship applications increased by nearly 50%. Additionally, we added a non-clinical mental health advocate. So during the pandemic, we realized that the needs of our students' mental health concerns were increasing, but we realized that they really didn't need to specifically talk to a clinician. They really just wanted to talk to someone that they could connect with and be guided to the right resources. So, a combination of all of those things to address the barriers that our students, experience has really helped with our persistence and completion rates.
I guess I would just, jump in as well, because I'm thinking about all of our students' needs. And of course, we have the pandemic the last 2 years. So some of this, the pandemic has highlighted or even accelerated some of these, but some aspects were started before. I'm glad my colleague brought up OER, Open Educational Resources. We've been working on that for a few years. I would say early on, 4 or 5 years ago, it was all right, who can we get to pilot this 1 or 2 courses switching? And now all of a sudden, we're over 50% of our college courses offering OER or no cost, low cost text under $40. One of the other things we've done is we built a welcome center. You know, when I first walked into to college, you know, it was almost, where do you go? Where do you start? There were some offices tucked to the side. There wasn't a real welcoming area. And that could be a barrier for students not understanding, you know, all of our terminology, right? What is a registrar? What is a bursar? You know, so the Welcome Center just says, come here for any questions and whatnot. The last piece I would add is similar to Kimberly, is around the, you know, the scholarship piece of, we've created what's called gap scholarships. It's the difference between what students can afford and what they owe at the end of every semester. I was finding, you know, I would always look at the balance sheet. We would have, you know, 30, 40, 50 students with balances of like $60, $90 that are keeping them from registering for the next semester. So we created a fundraiser. We do a golf tournament. You know, it may sound hokey, but every spring we do a golf tournament, and I will make a list of just initials, not the students' names, and say, look, here are all the balances. How many of you would like to see this student move on, this student move on? And we collect a ton of money as part of a golf tournament. And we go back and we apply that money right to those students' accounts. We get them registered for the next semester. It's just a simple way that it's amazing. It makes you take a step back and say, you know what, $90 is keeping someone from being on their career path all the way through the journey. So it is, you know, in retrospect, there are a lot of these little things that add up to some real big barriers that are perceived, not necessarily real.
I'll just add, you know, I'm pretty blessed. We have developed a comprehensive student success strategy, which has at its core student success teams. So every one of my credit-bearing students at the college has their dean, their program director, a personal counselor, a financial aid person, a peer mentor. So they have a wraparound team that they are able to engage with and who is able to monitor their progress and to really engage with just-in-time interventions versus just-in-case interventions. So, you know, sometimes just-in-case says, you know, well, at orientation, we gave you all the stack of stuff that you were supposed to keep with you every day in case something happened. So, you know, read page 937 and there's the answer. You know, no, that's really not going to be helpful to students. So with the student success team, we're able to look at the student milestones of success and what supports they need and looking at student behaviors. How do we make sure that we stay connected, make sure they get the resources that they need when they need them? It's not enough to say, well, you know, we have a tutoring center. Yeah, we also have lots of things. That doesn't mean that people are going to naturally go there. So we have to look at students' behaviors. We have to look at how they engage with our technology, how they engage with our offices, and then be very intentional about making sure that they are a part of sort of continued communications at critical touch points through our student success team and everything, you know, whether you're using Starfish, whether it doesn't matter what your sort of technological sort of structure is, find a structure that provides the kind of cadence of communication with students to give them what they need when they need it so that they can stay and succeed. And we provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call center as an example. We find that students call 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and guess what? 70% of those issues that they have are resolved in that telephone call. So, you know, I don't have the resources to do that alone, but by having a partnership with a company that does that support service, you can actually scale up the kinds of supports for students that enable them to feel like they own part of their destiny.
A couple of things that I heard was being college ready versus student ready. Partnerships is key, whether with academic affairs, local organizations, or others. And I'm going to jump to Chelsea's question, who wants to know, Michael, directly from you or any others who have a similar model, how do you connect students to their support team? And then we'll address Tammy's question on if you all have technology available for students. As a teacher, we're asking that we get computers for our students.
Yeah.
So Michael, first.
Yeah. So it goes back to this idea that, you know, the communications primarily are electronic through the Student Success Center, Student Success teams. The advisor is the person very specifically responsible for being the quarterback of that team to make sure that they know what's going on in a case management type of scenario so that we monitor student progress. We have milestones by students so that we can make sure that we're getting to them just in time. And the other piece, as I say, is that, you know, I have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week tutoring, 24-hour, 7-day a week call center, 24-hour, 7-day a week telehealth, you know, because we partner with other companies that can expand capacity. I don't have the money or the staff to be able to do all of that. I don't have it. So you have to look for companies that actually can broaden your sort of capacity to be able to meet the students at times that are appropriate for the students, because issues happen. You know, when you're writing a paper and your child has 103 fever, and you're rushing to the hospital trying to get relief for a screaming child, but the paper is due tomorrow, who are you going to call? You got to call somebody, or you're going to, that may be the time that people drop out. And so we've got to have mechanisms in place to reduce the likelihood of dropping out in that situation. And so that's sort of how we think about connecting students with resources.
Thank you, Michael. Would anyone like to answer about the technology for students?
I'll jump in. I'm sure my colleagues have more to add. This is probably another one that's been accelerated by the pandemic, right? Obviously, quickly we had to switch remote, and technology became the lifeline. But even prior, this was an issue because it's an affordability, which equals an access issue for us. So our students, we have a laptop loaner program, probably not uncommon with others. And we try to evaluate, you know, as part of the onboarding process, we're talking with students about what they have for computers, iPads, technology, obviously talking about when they're on campus, our labs and whatnot. But if students do not have them, we are assigning them laptops to check out and have come back. Others are just plain basic internet and broadband. Let's start there. We're in northern New Hampshire, to give you a little context here, where broadband is not necessarily always available. And again, in the pandemic, there was zero because people were going, you know, used to go to the library and some of the restaurants, et cetera. So we created Wi-Fi. All our parking lots are Wi-Fi enabled, so people can come sit in the parking lot. We also had hotspots. We loan out and we pay the monthly fee on those. You know, again, it's the strategic investment that, you know, Michael's talking about. Where do we want to put our money? It's in student success. So as far as that technology, and then, you know, I'll just list also, when we're speaking more broadly, partnerships with organizations that can help and support through technology that we can't scale on our own, but we can buy into. KEPRO is our mental health counseling. I'm not endorsing one way or another. However, they're available 24/7. They hook you up with a live person. And, you know, whether it's Starfish or we have EAB Navigate's, just another great platform for communicating with students as well. So technology is a place of investment. I scream it loud and clear because, you know, that's an affordability, which equals accessibility issues for students. And that's how you will lose them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just add to Chuck's point. We too have a laptop loaner program, but, you know, we're really wanting to be disruptive and very intentional about the support for our students, particularly our new students. So this upcoming year, you know, we talked to faculty and they were saying there were so many students who talked about not having a laptop or a computer, but we had all these computers across the district that went unloaned. And so because we know that our students aren't as intentional about, you know, seeking out their services, every new student will be receiving a laptop, and we will also be loading on all of their textbooks. So that lends itself to our need to be, you know, fully adopted for OER. And that way we can take the guesswork out of it. We don't have to count on our students to go and purchase their textbooks with their financial aid. We will be loading all of their texts onto their laptop. We also make our laptops available to our faculty as well. You know, we made some assumptions about, you know, whether or not our adjunct faculty were, you know, able to survive during the pandemic, to someone's point. And we learned that a lot of them also wanted to access the food pantry and needed the access to technology. And so laptops are also available to all of our faculty as well as our adjunct. And so those types of intentional steps, you know, for students will hopefully really make a huge difference. We did have, again, the good fortune of having a very philanthropic donor. And so we are able to provide these laptops to every new student who will enter our doors in the fall.
Thank you all. Daryl, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question for our panelists?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Daryl Parker. I'm currently a student at Morehead State University, and I'm a staff member at Hazard Community Technical College. Dr. Baston, I wanted to ask you about ways that you have target the students who are in need? Like, is there a specific steps that you go through to reach these students, or do you assign someone to them? Because in my experience, I've learned that students tend to take up with certain staff and faculty members better than they do others. So I was just wanting to get your insight on ways that I could implement this at my campus to help these students that are in need, especially when it comes to access to food, SNAP benefits, different other resources and everything.
Thank you, Daryl, for an excellent question. As far as I'm concerned, it's very important that the institution embed these supports so that they're inescapable. Because at the end of the day, if you're talking about public benefits as an example, embedded in financial aid. If your folks are going to do a FAFSA form, if your folks are going to fill out the process, do the public benefits with them right then as part of that process. Make sure that in the advisement process, if you're helping students register for classes, add that to the list of things that they might be eligible for, food pantry supports or whatever it is that they might need access to, or to make it a part of things that are inescapable. That's why we put all of this stuff on the syllabus. Where to go to get what, because they got to read the syllabus, so don't, I hope they do anyway, but the key is find the systems that students can't escape. Don't presume that the students are going to, on their own, use resources and come after something. Add it on. As part of orientation, add some things on. As part of, your registration, add some things on. Because particularly new students, they don't know no different anyway. So if you have to register for your financial aid, register for your public benefits. And because then that is how you take the stigma out of it. It's not like you're saying, the way I talk about public benefits as an example is this. Do you like having sanitation workers? Do you like having a public bus in your community? Do you like, having the military fight our battles in wars, foreign and domestic? Yes. Well, all those are public benefits. They're all taxpayer dollars. So get what you need to do what you need to do, because when it's your turn to pay taxes, you will be making a way for somebody else. So we got to begin to look at systems that students can't escape and embed the supports and make them easy to access, versus they don't come to school to major in bureaucracy. So we don't need to actually make it hard for them to navigate and get access to these systems.
If I can just add one quick thing. I feel like Michael and I should be co-presidents at a couple of these colleges, because I feel like we use the same language. Language is important. Being able to talk to students is not, not saying SNAP. It's not saying, using all these terms, but saying, generally loosely, if you're eligible for Pell and you're getting it here. So we pull a list of those students and we reach out. And then beyond that, our Vista, who is a graduate, which works out in our favor, instead of saying, okay, who would use SNAP benefits? Okay, this is about roughly $200 or so a month. It's a plastic card. You can buy your groceries. How many of you want to, buy a couple loaves of bread? You have to get real tangible. You have to be able to speak their language and be able to say, hey, right down here at this Shaw's, grocery store, this is what you would do. It's a plastic card. No one stands around you, would know any different. And guess what? You've already earned this back to the taxpayer dollar. So I think there's a language component in there embedded as well. And back to just normalizing this a bit too.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into our question about some of the ways that you have used data points to make decisions and how it's impacted your persistence or retention, there's two questions that are kind of similar in the chat. One is, who do you use on your campuses to help coach students to apply for SNAP? There goes that acronym and convoluted process. And then second is, how do you offer staff training as things are changing in innovative ways and keeping everyone in the loop? Because communication, regardless of the name in front of that school, is always a challenge between students, between staff, between faculty. So maybe two of you can address that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, the way we communicate our SNAP benefits is basically handled through our wellness center and also our advising center. We also have a table where we invite folks out to actually sign up on site and walk them through the process. Another intentional step that we've taken in that regard too is to open a money management center where we really focus on financial literacy, and we talk about all of the monetary benefits that are available to our students. So yeah, we've taken a really active approach and our money management center just opened this spring. So we don't have any metrics around the impact, but just merely based on the number of students who are visiting, we know that it's really making a difference for our students.
Really? One other?
I mean, I can jump in quickly. We do what's called a monthly campus conversation, and I'm sure others do similar, and it's recorded and people can go back and watch it. But anytime there is something new, that's where we address it. But I also call the waterfall technique. Weekly, we meet as a college leadership team. Then we have staff meetings that, everything trickles within. And then it is a customized one-off approach where every single student is touched somehow, some way. We call it the White Mountains magic, that every single student has somebody they rely on, and they're constantly communicating, and we create warm handoffs so there are not cracks. So for example, an academic advisor would literally walk a student into financial aid and say, look, this is how we find out if you're eligible, or, walk to our AmeriCorps Vista and say, look, this is the cabbie, or this is how you get your meals. So I think if we can avoid having any crevices in our work and there are warm handoffs and we are all on the same page, that communication will continue to flow out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, so my panelists, this is an amazing conversation. You're getting kudos in the chat. So I'm gonna, in the interest of time, we have 3 questions to get through, and please, if folks have other questions, drop them in there because we want to get to your questions. But again, what are some ways that you have used data to make decisions, and particularly to address student basic needs and its impact on persistence or retention?
As we think about how we're going to fund things, you look at what the data tells you. I'm very practical when it comes to, resource allocation. I want to understand what is going to give us the best likelihood of students being retained in the semester, being re-enrolled in a subsequent semester, and allowing themselves to get to the place where they can matriculate. And so understanding what are the different financial barriers, what are the interventions that are required. Kimberly talked wonderfully about the importance of equity. So I disaggregate the data to see, are there inequities with respect to how we're connecting with students in the first place? Are we making sure that we cast in the widest nets for programs that are going to give students an opportunity to get higher incomes because of the nature of the program, and not have build bridges to nowhere where folks get an academic program and come out and get a degree with something that ultimately they didn't need this degree to get the same amount of money to work at this job. So it's really thinking deeply about all of the parts of the student experience, and ultimately what are the appropriate interventions, because that data tells you if you're going to have an extra advisor, or if you're going to, make available more instruction or support for faculty so that they can engage better in OER, the open educational research. Your data helps inform your should help inform your financial decisions. That's how I think about it. What is the best possible way to take very limited resources to do the most good?
Yeah, I think to add on, I agree with everything what Dr. Batson said. One thing that we really noticed throughout the pandemic, particularly in fall of 2020, we paid close attention to our course success and course retention rates. And obviously, I'm sure this is not uncommon. The students did not fare very well in that, using a virtual platform and or modality. And so we were really excited about moving out of a pandemic, but also being very conscious of, the students' needs for, being socially distanced and still being quite aware that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And in surveying our students, I know that's cliche, there's lots of surveys, but that's really a good way to get a better understanding of what our students want and need. We have decided to move towards more of a hybrid approach. Our students really are high touch, but and somewhat low technology, but our students seem to want a little bit of both. And so that engagement with faculty on site is really important, but they also really like the flexibility of, not always being on campus. And so what we did in looking at our data and looking at our course success and retention, understanding that students weren't wholly successful in a full virtual modality, we are moving more to hybrid. So we'll be offering more hybrid opportunities to our students. So that's an opportunity for you to really look at your data and make choices and decisions that really meet the needs of your students.
Yeah, I would agree with both of my colleagues. And in the essence of time, I'll add, two last pieces. One, I love forensically data harvesting. Where are our students coming from? For which programs? As mentioned at the onset, we have 3 academic centers. We will literally move a program, assuming it doesn't have a giant lab, based on student demand and student need. The other thing we'll do is students' time is the most important thing in the universe. So rather than scheduling them one semester at a time, we have them on full year-round course scheduling. That way, we meet with them once at orientation in the summer and they are good all the way through the next summer. So we're saving their time, we're increasing efficiency and bandwidth for our team, and we're not chasing students those last 2 weeks before classes start, which is something none of us love doing. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Okay, so this has been an awesome conversation, and we do have until 1:15. So participants, please feel free to continue to send questions. It's been all positive, and we're going to take a quick detour to a question that I know my panelists were like, ooh, so you don't have to name anyone by name, but as you've explored ways to address food insecurity and basic needs, what stakeholders, if any, have expressed resistance to these initiatives, and how have you worked, I'm sure, in partnership and harmony to address those?
I mean, I'll speak to just quickly us offering free meals because, we're part of a community college system. There are 7 colleges, 12 locations. I've also, one of my locations borders Maine, one borders Vermont. They said, you're offering free meals. Please don't tell too many people that because they think I'm doing it as a recruiting technique, frankly. If students come in and it increases college access, great, but I'm not trying to steal anyone's students. I'm trying to keep my own. So it wasn't, received popularly from some of my counterparts. So I will say that, not always positive, Felipe. How's that?
Michael or Kimberly?
I haven't had much resistance. And in fact, I got more support than I had anticipated, particularly from the faculty. I think, our faculty, they give like thousands of dollars a year in support of these programs. I mean, they particularly our faculty union, we have collective bargaining units here, and they have been extraordinarily generous. What they do for Thanksgiving, full Thanksgiving baskets for students whose families have need, and then not just at Thanksgiving, but throughout the year. So I'm in a position, thankfully, where we have extraordinarily generous people that have been so receptive. And then we have students, they're not afraid or ashamed or, oh my goodness, I don't know if they come get their stuff and they take it home because they want to, they want to be in a place that people care about them, and they see themselves. And so many of my students who are packing bags and doing things to volunteers, they want to help too.
Yeah, I would agree. Everyone has overwhelmingly been really supportive. If I had to just, pinpoint one thing, I would say, I have been exploring the opportunity to build an on-site residence hall. And as you know, a lot of community colleges, don't necessarily make that investment. It would be a public-private venture. And of course, my aldermen in the area are not as excited about my desire to be able to address housing insecurity for our students. Residence halls are high risk. I do understand that. But when we, again, survey our students and they identify housing insecurity as a major concern, I think it's incumbent upon us, as leaders at community colleges to at least attempt to meet the needs. So in having conversations with some of the local elected officials, there has been a bit of resistance as it relates to building a residence hall or affordable housing.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. In what ways does your state public assistance agency support your efforts? And so we're talking about Illinois, New York, and New Hampshire.
I guess I'll start from New Hampshire. First and foremost, for some context, we are, as higher ed, we are funded either 49th or 50th out of the 50 states every other year. We bounce back and forth with Vermont for least amount of funding. So we're used to grappling for funding, but partnerships with state agencies, Employment Security, others. The neat thing for us is we are co-located with some of these organizations. In Littleton, one of our small centers, we are literally partners across the hallway. So we work very closely. I mentioned warm handoffs. We do referrals all day long, back and forth. But also, one of the things we try to really highlight with these organizations are funding streams or grant availability or earmarks. Quite a bit. And, we do this from a workforce development standpoint as well, but also for folks returning from work, but also prior learning assessment. We haven't touched on much. This to me is one of the areas, first of all, of the great equalizer as far as, buying credits, if you will. If I hate to ever say it that way, but I'm going to, because folks with some experience already out in the workforce, they come in and they can say, all right, now they're starting out with 9, 12, or 15 credits. So that's one of the great partnerships we have, just speaking of employment security for us, but also the Charitable Foundation. I'm not sure if folks heard, but New Hampshire Charitable Foundation funded a free course for all New Hampshire high school graduates last year. This was an excellent partnership for us, something we will probably duplicate. Started out with, the 2021 graduates, and now we believe it is, knock on wood, going to continue going forward. So I feel like those partnerships are really starting to happen for us as well.
Michael, anything from your end?
Well, in the state of New York, we have two systems. We have the City University of New York, which is all of the 7 schools in New York City. I was formerly there at LaGuardia. And then the State University, where we have 30 community colleges, which I'm a part of the State University system now. So if you're in the city, you're working with the local municipal governments, and we had very, very strong relationships with local municipal governments for the purpose of integrating a lot of the public benefits work, a lot of the other human resource oriented supports for students. And with respect to working in the state level, you really work with your local governments. So in Rockland County, where I'm located, which is 25 miles from New York City, I have a very strong relationship with the Department of Human Services here and all of the other support agencies within the county. So a lot of the sort of social service infrastructure is hardwired between the direct relationship with county government and my staff. So it is, wherever you are, it's important that if your local community is networked appropriately with local government, you really can integrate and expand capacity so that, you can't be a social service agency as a college because you are an educational institution. However, you can work with your community-based organizations and your local government partners so that you can provide the level of significant connection for social services to improve the life of your students. So I think the intentionality with the partnerships is very critical.
Thank you all. We have a question, and what additional resources not mentioned yet are in place for first-generation students and non-traditional students or adult learners?
I'll touch quickly again, because I mentioned prior learning assessment, and this is where, post-traditional or non-traditional students who are coming to us with experience, I would say we're also working very closely on crosswalks from the credit to non-credit space. Mm-hmm. It can shorten time to graduation, but also I think it brings people in the door rather than thinking they're starting at, ground zero. Again, if they're starting with almost a semester or more under their belt, this is a place for us to really entice those post-traditional students to come back or bring us some credits, and really finding a place for those. Military friendly, certainly bringing in some of that general experience in the military as well for a course credit. The first gen, I don't want to say I'm stumped, but I would say we play to the lowest common denominator and treat all of our students as if they were first generation. Even if they have siblings, parents, et cetera, who have gone through the process, we take the time and try to customize the experience and assume everyone is starting from ground zero. walking them through FAFSA completion, public benefits, application process, where bills would be paid, how to access the cabinet. And I love being at a 2-year community college because I always say every semester, everyone has amnesia. You know, they don't know how it was done before. So walking students through the entire process, and if something has changed, guess what? This is the way we do it now. And every single student, we meet them at ground zero.
Yeah, and we take a similar approach. As you know, federally funding for programs such as TRIO have really been diminished. And we unfortunately haven't had the good fortune of having a TRIO program on campus. So similar to Chuck, we try to treat all of our students as if they're, we like to talk about our athletes, right? Like our athletes have a very different experience than your traditional student. And we expect that our traditional students should have the same experience as an athlete. So everyone is now going to receive a coach and a peer mentor. We have a very comprehensive new student orientation. You know, we learn that our students, and we talked a little bit about technology. It's not that they're not technologically savvy, they're just phone savvy, like they're cell phone savvy. And we learned that through the pandemic. And so really having a very intentional course about how to use your portal has been really important, especially for a student who's, you know, our average age is 26. And so they're not accustomed to our student information system or the educational platform that we use. So we've been really intentional about making sure that there's a lot of high touch activity with all of our students, not just with our first gen, although there's a significant number of our students are first generation college students, and we are aware of that. So treating everyone with a similar experience has been really effective.
We've been very fortunate. We have TRIO programs here. We have other student support programs here. We do have educational opportunity programs here in New York. So we do have some of those that are funded by the state. So we've been very, very fortunate to have both federal and state support, specifically focusing on how we help first generation students.
Okay, thank you. So we have one last question that we want to get to, and then if we have time, we'll get to the 2 that are in the chat. But to my college presidents, if you had infinite resources to address student basic needs, where would those resources go today?
Well, I mean, I guess it starts with we would take care of the universe, right? But this probably falls under the political arm of, there's always talk about free community college and all of the barriers that are out there. But I guess I would create a system in which there's a student skin in the game, and that skin is not necessarily financial. I talked to, actually, I had a meeting with a couple of our senators, just when we were talking about free community college, and I would create a model that's, sort of a waterfall technique where a student, the first time they, fall semester, they come in, they use any scholarships they might have, they have Pell eligibility. We take care of any other services they cannot afford. They basically are getting like a caseworker, right? Almost like our academic advisors are. If they persist to the next semester, that is a half-price semester. They go to the next semester, it's half after that. You do the math, it comes down to 0 for graduation. But anything they cannot afford, we identify a working partner to support them, sponsoring them somehow, some way. The funding from us becomes, financially, a lot of these barriers are financial, unfortunately. There's a housing partnership we would have to establish. There is a, food partnership. There's a transportation, whether it's with a bus system. We're not in the center of New York or near New York City. We don't have public transportation. That may sound crazy, but we do not. So I think we would check all of the boxes. We would have partnerships, and money would be off the table. I mean, that would be the one thing, but I don't think it would change our work. I think it would just double down the efforts we're making.
Chuck, Michael, or Kimberly?
I would want to invest heavily on moving students from part-time to full-time status. Mm-hmm. I would really want to be able to address the financial obligations that cause students to go part-time instead of full-time. Because if we can increase the number of folks that move from part-time to full-time, to shorten the length of time it takes them to earn their degree, which accelerates the time they can get into the work making, world of work, making the kind of living that best supports their family and getting on a meaningful career path to the life that they deserve. That to me would be a very valuable investment. We know all over this country, so many of our students have to go to part-time because of not just tuition, but all of the non-tuition related challenges and economic scenarios that require that. If we could in some way figure out how to fill the gap between whatever funding they would need for their tuition and to address this part-time reality so that they could go to full-time, that would be how I would want to accelerate opportunities for students.
Yeah, I would just have to add to that. I mean, I was going to say something similar. When you talk about basic needs, particularly for students who are adults, the basic need of our students is a job, ultimately. You know, if I had access to just unlimited resources, I would invest them in my faculty to develop pedagogy that is relevant to the student and to the workforce needs. And a prime example of that, you know, here in Illinois in 2019, recreational cannabis became legal. And my faculty came to me and said, hey, look, we've been bleeding heavily in the loss of African-American men. And when you look at the war on drugs, those most disproportionately impacted were Black and brown individuals, particularly Black men. So let's start a cannabis studies program. And that's exactly what we did. Right now, our cannabis studies program is our largest certificate program. It's a one semester program. Students are graduating and getting jobs in dispensaries, not owning dispensaries, but attempting to own dispensaries and making incomes of nearly $75,000. So being able to improve the economic mobility of our students by developing relevant pedagogy and investing in that, you know, would be, you know, the ultimate, you know, cherry on top for me.
Thank you both. I know it's nice to dream, and I know it sounds like you all have done amazing work at your individual institutions and throughout your career. So we have time for the last two questions that are in the chat before we wrap up. And if somebody would like to take this one, have you had any success in developing an earn and learn model with employers who can deliver flexible paid employment opportunities for students?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing we've all done apprenticeship programs. I guess I'll speak to that first, particularly in healthcare. You know, I'll highlight one program. It's our medical assisting program. We used to have a specific certificate using our nursing lab. And really, you know, pandemic aside, hospitals and skilled care facilities can't wait that long for our healthcare workers. They just can't. There's such a dire need. So we have a program where, first of all, the hospital hires the students, pays for them to take a couple of courses with us on site. Couple of courses are happening in their clinical portion. It is funded by the hospital. They do a fundraiser every year and fund the program itself. And then they hire them upon passing you know, the exam at the end. Probably our most successful, you know, 95% pass rate on the exam. If they don't pass the first time, they'll take it again, but they're working all along. There's true investment, and financially it's paid for. And I'll grab the article and throw it in the link here in the chat, but it's one of our examples. I'm sure others do as well.
Yeah, we do the same thing. Olive Harvey is, we have a sector. All of our colleges have a center of excellence, and ours is transportation, distribution, and logistics. So we have an amazing partnership with both Amazon and UPS. We're similar to you. You know, our students are able to be employed by UPS and Amazon. They'll pay for their coursework while they're being trained. And then subsequently, you know, we're preparing them to become full-time employees in, you know, pursuit of managerial positions. So yes, absolutely something similar.
And it works like that in New York. We've got our EMT work. We work with our Rockland EMTs and basically earn and learn. And, you know, and they have guaranteed jobs, good salaries, and a career ladder. So they start as EMTs, they go to be paramedics, they then take lots of different opportunities in the medical field.
Thank you. Okay, and final question before I wrap up is, does any of your campuses put a focus on STEM courses geared towards minority students? If so, which ways have been effective?
Not specifically for us, you know, mine's probably more of a volume game. I need to be free and open for all students to join, just to get a critical mass of the courses to run, particularly as you get into higher level STEM courses. Practical matter more than anything.
Yeah, and at my college, we wrote for a PBI STEM, so predominantly Black institution STEM grant, which we were successful in getting. And it encourages high school students to go into the STEM. So we have those students on our campus, in our labs, tons of workshops and opportunities to be introduced to people that look like them in the STEM fields. And that has been highly successful. We would like for those students to eventually come to our institution, but what we've noticed is that, the exposure and the preparedness has allowed them to get into some of the, more prestigious four-year institutions after coming through our program.
And same with us, we got a PTech program. So we have a PTech high school that actually is the feeder to STEM programs to get college credits while they're in high school for population that would never normally have access to STEM, or even some of them didn't even want to finish high school. So, I mean, we really use this as a way to keep them in high school, get them interested in science as STEM, and then, move them through the college.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I'd just like to conclude with students' basic needs ranges based on institutional type, size, and geographical locations, as you've heard today. Students experience needs in an array of ways. While obtaining more national quantitative data and conducting additional research is critical for understanding your own students' basic needs on your individual campuses and understanding their lived experiences and how it affects their academic performance and college completion. As you can see, these amazing presidents have been finding ways, innovative, and partnerships to mobilize the support for their students and identifying basic needs and investing, as all three of them have said, and these addressing these needs as a student success barrier is crucial to yield positive achievements outcomes, particularly for historically marginalized students. And we talked a lot about equity plans and having those kinds of supports. So to wrap up the webinar, simply put, I'm gonna have to quote Chuck, who said, "How can we not afford to pay for these?" We hope that you leave today inspired as I am and have learned some new information and have your brain fired up thinking of creative solutions to this major societal issues that permeates today's college students and affect our workforce and their social mobility, as we've chatted today. I'll be remiss if I don't thank from the bottom of my heart, gracias, gracias, gracias to our panelists for sharing their wealth of knowledge with us. And as you can all see, I could work for any of these three college presidents. And I just thank you so much because it's been such a pleasure to get to know you all. I'll turn it back to Melanie or Lily.
Yep. So I just want to say a quick thank you to our phenomenal panelists. I'm over here taking notes because this has just been great. So thank you so much again for your time. I'll turn it over to Lily for closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this was so incredible. I also was taking copious notes. And everybody who is still with us on the webinar, or if you're going to be watching our recording, I'm just really excited that this 5-webinar series with Complete College America, I think it really planted some amazing seeds. It gave us some incredible ideas. It showed us some great exemplars of the possibilities that are out there. And we have 5 campuses that are working with the collaborative now on a continuous improvement project focused on student basic needs. And we're going to continue that work through June. And I'm really excited for the next phase of the student basic needs initiatives here in Kentucky. I hope to see you all at the Student Success Summit, April 11th and 12th. I think Phyllis is going to put the link to that in the chat in case any of your colleagues haven't had a chance to register. We've extended the deadline to March 31st. We have over 330 people already registered. And so it's going to be a great convening. I'm so excited to see folks in person and, obviously still being safe, but just, a good chance to connect and have more organic conversations. So we look forward to seeing you all soon. I'll send a follow-up email with information linked to the Impact Exchange. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.